A soaking wet maid pulled his unconscious son from a muddy pit, risking her life. The billionaire didn't say thank you. He snatched the boy and screamed, "What the hell are you doing with my son?" His son whispered, "Daddy, she saved me." But Harrison's pride had already spoken. Now his business partner is calling her a thief. You sure you didn't push the kid first? But what Harrison doesn't know is that this wasn't the first time Alina crossed paths with his family. When he discovers the real reason she took this job, the truth will shake his world to its core. But to understand the high-stakes mission and the choices that followed, you have to go back to the rain, the mud, and the single blinding mistake that started it all. Also download your free ebook titled, How to Heal from Betrayal Without Becoming Bitter, by clicking the link in the description and in the pinned comment. A billionaire watches his black maid carry his disabled son from muddy water, and what he assumes in that split second will haunt him forever. Harrison Caldwell stood frozen at the edge of his marble terrace, rain hammering against his $2,000 suit. Through the downpour, he saw something that made his blood turn to ice. Alina Baptiste, his son's caretaker, was emerging from the flooded garden pond, struggling through knee-deep mud. In her arms, limp and soaked, was his 7-year-old boy, Eli, his son who couldn't walk, his son who relied on a wheelchair, his son who should have been safe inside the mansion. Harrison's mind went to the darkest place first. What had she done? He bolted down the terrace steps, shoes slipping on wet stone, heart hammering so loud it drowned out the thunder. 20 yards away, 15. He could see Alina's face now, strained, desperate, her uniform clinging to her thin frame. Mud streaked across her dark skin. Eli's head lolled against her shoulder. Put him down. Harrison's voice tore through the storm. Alina's eyes snapped up, wide, terrified. But she didn't stop moving. She kept trudging forward, each step a battle against the sucking mud that tried to claim her ankles. I said, put my son down. Harrison closed the distance, rage and fear twisting inside his chest like barbed wire. 10 yards now. He could see Eli's pale lips, the way his small body hung too still in her arms. Every wealthy parent's nightmare was unfolding right in front of him, and the woman he'd trusted, the woman he'd brought into his home 6 months ago, was at the center of it. How could he have been so blind? Alina finally reached solid ground, gasping for air, her legs shaking. She gently lowered Eli onto the grass, and that's when Harrison saw it. His son's chest was rising, falling, breathing, alive. But that didn't answer the question screaming in Harrison's mind. Why was Eli in the water in the first place? Step away from him. Harrison's voice dropped to something cold and lethal as he knelt beside his son. His hands trembled as he checked Eli's pulse, felt the weak but steady rhythm beneath his fingertips. The boy's eyes were closed, his small body shivering violently. Alina took 2 steps back, her own body trembling just as hard. Mud covered her from chest to feet. Her braids, usually tied neatly back, hung loose and dripping. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out except a choked sob. Don't. Harrison cut her off. He gathered Eli into his arms, the boy's weight so fragile it made his chest ache. I don't want to hear it. Not one word. Behind them, the mansion's back door burst open. Members of the household staff spilled out, the cook, 2 groundskeepers, Harrison's personal assistant. They stopped at the terrace edge, watching the scene unfold with wide eyes and sealed mouths. Nobody moved to help. Nobody spoke. They'd all seen what Harrison had seen. The black maid, the white disabled child, the muddy water. In their silence, judgment hung heavy as the rain. Harrison's mind raced through the past 6 months. He'd hired Alina through an agency that specialized in caregivers for children with disabilities. Her references had been flawless. Her manner with Eli had been patient, gentle, professional. She transformed his son's daily routines, made therapy sessions less painful, even coaxed rare belly laughs from a boy who'd known too much suffering in his short life. But people wore masks, didn't they? People hid their true nature until the moment they revealed it. Harrison stood, cradling Eli against his chest. The boy felt so cold. Too cold. He needed to get him inside, checked by Dr. Renford immediately. "Mr. Caldwell, please." Alina's voice cracked. She took a step forward, hand reaching out. "I told you not to speak." Harrison's words came out like shards of glass. "Security will escort you off the property. I'll have your belongings sent wherever you're going. But you're done here." Alina's hand dropped to her side. Tears mixed with rain on her face, making tracks through the mud on her cheeks. She looked destroyed, shattered. But Harrison couldn't let himself care about that right now. His son came first. His son, who'd already survived one tragedy when his mother died during childbirth, a loss that had turned Harrison's heart to stone. He'd built walls around himself and Eli, let wealth create distance from a world that had taken so much from them. And now this woman had breached those walls, gotten close to his boy, and somehow Eli had ended up half drowned in a garden pond during a storm. The math was simple, damning. Harrison turned his back on Alina and carried Eli toward the mansion. The staff parted to let him through, their faces carefully blank. Professional. But he could feel their thoughts, see it in the way they deliberately avoided looking at the maid still standing in the rain. If you were in Harrison's place, would pride blind you to the truth? Would you see guilt before gratitude? Fear before heroism? As Harrison crossed the threshold into his climate-controlled palace, he heard something behind him. Soft, broken. Alina's voice carried on the wind. Words he barely caught. "I pulled him out." He didn't turn around, didn't acknowledge her. The door closed with a decisive click, sealing out the storm and the woman who'd just lost everything. But in his arms, something shifted. The smallest movement. Eli's fingers twitched against Harrison's chest. Harrison laid Eli on the leather sofa in his study, the boy's wet clothes soaking into expensive Italian fabric he didn't care about. His hands fumbled with his phone, dialing Dr. Renford's private number. The doctor lived 20 minutes away, but would break every speed limit to get here. Eli's eyelids fluttered. "Don't move, buddy." Harrison grabbed a cashmere throw from the armchair, tucking it around his son's shivering frame. "Help's coming. You're safe now." Safe. The word felt wrong in his mouth. Eli hadn't been safe. Not under Harrison's watch. Not in his own home. Eli's lips moved, forming soundless words. Don't try to talk." Harrison pressed his palm against his son's forehead. Too cold still. How long had he been in that water? 5 minutes? 10? Long enough to steal the warmth from his small body. But Eli's eyes opened fully now, pupils dilating as they focused on his father's face. His mouth kept working, determined to form words through chattering teeth. "Dad, I'm here." Harrison's throat constricted. He so rarely heard his son's voice. Eli had learned early that speaking required energy his body didn't have much of. The cerebral palsy that locked his legs also made every word a battle. Harrison's jaw clenched. He didn't want to hear this. Didn't want his son to relive whatever had happened out there. The police could take a statement later, after Eli was warm and dry and the memory had softened at the edges. But Eli's small hand shot out from under the blanket, fingers wrapping around Harrison's wrist with surprising strength. "She saved me." 3 words. Clear as crystal. Undeniable. Harrison's world tilted sideways. "What?" "She saved me." Eli's voice grew stronger, urgent, like he needed his father to understand this one crucial fact. "Fell in. Couldn't move. She came. Pulled me out." The study suddenly felt too small, the air too thick. Harrison's mind scrambled to rewrite the story he'd constructed 10 minutes ago. The narrative that had been so obvious, so clear-cut, so easy to believe. "You fell in." Harrison repeated, the words coming out strangled. Eli nodded, his dark curls plastered to his pale forehead. Watching the rain. Got too close. Wheelchair rolled. Couldn't stop it. Harrison's stomach dropped through the floor. The garden pond. He'd meant to install a railing there months ago. The landscape architect had recommended it. But Harrison had been busy closing a merger, and then there was the Tokyo trip, and the upgrade could wait because Eli was always supervised, always watched, always. Except he hadn't been watched closely enough. And Alina had found him. Alina had jumped in without hesitation. Alina had fought through mud and water to save a boy who couldn't save himself. While Harrison had assumed the worst. Dad. Eli's voice wavered. Where's Alina? Is she okay? Harrison couldn't answer. Words jammed in his throat like rusted gears. He'd just fired her. Humiliated her in front of the staff. Sent her away in shame for an act of courage that deserved a medal. Because of how it looked. Because of what he'd assumed when he saw a black woman holding his white son. The realization hit him like a freight train. His own prejudice had written the story before he knew the facts. He'd seen danger where there was only devotion. Seen threat where there was only sacrifice. A soft knock interrupted his spiraling thoughts. Mrs. Chun, the head housekeeper, stood in the doorway. Her weathered face held something Harrison rarely saw there, disapproval. Mr. Caldwell, she said quietly. The staff is asking about Miss Baptiste. Through the study window, Harrison could see the back terrace. The workers still stood there in a loose cluster, watching something beyond his view. They hadn't dispersed, hadn't gone back to their duties. They were watching Alina. Harrison moved to the window. From this angle, he could see her. She hadn't left. Despite being fired, despite the humiliation, she stood in the rain by the garden shed, waiting. Her arms wrapped around herself, posture defeated, but her eyes stayed locked on the mansion. On the window where she knew Eli would be, making sure the boy was all right before she walked away forever. The workers at the gate weren't just watching. They were bearing witness. Silent judges to a moment that would define what kind of man Harrison Caldwell really was. Behind him, Eli coughed, a wet, rattling sound that sent panic shooting through Harrison's veins. She needs to come back, Eli whispered. Please. Hit subscribe if you believe heroism shouldn't go unnoticed. Because what happens next will test whether wealth can admit when it's wrong, or if pride will let an innocent woman take the blame for a rich man's guilt. Harrison Caldwell had a choice to make. The question was whether his conscience would arrive before his pride finished destroying an innocent life. 2 hours later, Harrison sat alone in his study, watching flames dance in the fireplace. Eli slept upstairs, finally warm, his breathing steady. Dr. Renford had examined him, declared him lucky, and left with instructions Harrison barely heard. Lucky. The word mocked him. Luck had nothing to do with it. Alina Baptiste had everything to do with it. Harrison poured himself 2 fingers of bourbon he wouldn't drink. The glass sat untouched on the mahogany side table, while rain continued its assault on the windows. Somewhere out there, Alina was packing her things in the staff quarters. Or maybe she'd already left. He'd been too much of a coward to check. His eyes drifted to the portrait above the fireplace. Vivian, his wife. Gone 7 years now, but her painted eyes still held that knowing look, the one that said she could see right through his carefully constructed walls. Never judge the hands that lift you up, Harrison. Her voice echoed in his memory, soft but firm. They'd been at a charity gala, and he'd made some dismissive comment about the waitstaff. She turned to him with disappointment in her gaze. Power makes it easy to look down. Character makes you look closer. He'd laughed it off then, kissed her forehead, and changed the subject. Now those words felt like prophecy. Harrison's phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chun. Miss Baptiste still hasn't left the grounds. She's asking if Eli needs anything before she goes. His chest tightened. Even now, fired and disgraced, she was thinking about his son. What kind of person did that? He stood, pacing the study's Persian rug. The logical move was to write her a check. A generous one. Compensation for wrongful termination, a non-disclosure agreement, and everyone moves on. Clean. Professional. The way wealthy people fix their mistakes. But something nagged at him. Something beyond the guilt twisting his gut. Harrison moved to his desk, opened his laptop, pulled up Alina's employment file. He'd barely glanced at it when the agency sent her over. Background check cleared. References stellar. Certification current. Standard stuff. He read deeper now. Place of birth, New Orleans. Age, 29. Education. Associate degree in early childhood development from a community college in Louisiana. Previous employment. Various caregiving positions across 3 states. Then he saw it. A scanned document near the bottom of the file. Emergency contact information. Mother's name, Celeste Baptiste. Harrison's fingers froze on the keyboard. Celeste. That name triggered something in the back of his mind. Something old. Something from before Vivian died. Back when he still paid attention to the people around him instead of just the deals in front of him. Where had he heard that name? Outside, thunder rolled across the estate like a warning. The fire crackled and popped, but Harrison barely heard it. His mind was reaching back through years of forgotten conversations, searching for a connection he couldn't quite grasp. Why did Alina Baptiste feel familiar in a way he couldn't explain? Dr. Marlowe stood in Harrison's study at 8 the next morning, medical bag in hand, expression grave. The boy's fine physically, the doctor said, pulling off his reading glasses. But he shouldn't be. Another 3 minutes in that water? We'd be having a different conversation. Harrison's coffee turned bitter in his mouth. You're certain? Hypothermia was setting in fast. His core temperature had dropped dangerously low. Dr. Marlowe fixed him with a look that felt more paternal than professional. Miss Baptiste's quick action saved Eli's life. No exaggeration. That's medical fact. The words should have brought relief. Instead, they landed like hammer blows to Harrison's ribs. I need to apologize to her, Harrison said quietly. You need to do more than apologize. Dr. Marlowe snapped his bag shut. You need to grovel. Heat flushed Harrison's neck. His ego reared up defensive. He was Harrison Caldwell, CEO of Caldwell Industries. Forbes list regular. Men twice his age asked for his business advice. He didn't grovel, but his son would be dead without a woman he'd treated like garbage. She hurt herself, Dr. Marlowe added, heading toward the door. Pulling Eli out of that pond. Deep laceration on her left forearm, probably from debris underwater. She'll need stitches. Harrison's stomach dropped. What? She refused treatment last night. Said she was fine. The doctor paused at the threshold. She's not fine, Harrison. Physically or otherwise. You broke something yesterday that money can't fix. The door closed with a soft click. Harrison stood frozen, his mind replaying the scene by the pond. Alina's strained face. Her trembling arms. The mud covering her from chest to knees. He'd been so consumed by his own fear, his own assumptions, he hadn't noticed she was injured. She'd risked her body to save his son, and he'd thanked her by destroying her reputation. His phone buzzed. A text from his head of security. Miss Baptiste still on property. Staff quarters, room 4B. Awaiting final instruction. Harrison's fingers tightened around the phone. Part of him wanted to send the check and be done with it. Let her go. Move on. Find a new caretaker who wouldn't complicate things with heroism and guilt. But the other part, the part that Vivian's memory still whispered to, knew that would be the coward's way out. Eli's voice drifted from upstairs, calling for Alina. He'd been asking for her all morning, confused why she hadn't brought his breakfast tray, hadn't helped him with his stretches, hadn't read him the chapter they'd started yesterday. How do you explain to a 7-year-old that his father destroyed the one person who made his days bearable? Harrison set down his coffee, drew a breath. made a decision that felt like swallowing glass. He'd go to her himself, face what he'd done, and pray she was merciful enough to hear him out. Alina sat on the edge of the narrow bed in room 4B, staring at the photograph in her hands. The edges were worn soft from years of handling. Her mother smiled back at her from the faded image. Celeste Baptiste in her nursing scrubs, standing outside Mercy General Hospital, pride shining in her dark eyes. "You always said to lead with kindness, Mama," Alina whispered to the photo, "even when the world doesn't return it." Her left arm throbbed beneath the makeshift bandage she'd wrapped herself. The cut was deeper than she'd admitted, but she'd learned long ago how to push through pain. Growing up poor taught you that. Moving between cities for work taught you that. Being invisible in other people's homes taught you that. She'd packed her duffel bag hours ago. 2 changes of clothes, toiletries, the photograph, a battered copy of Maya Angelou poems. Everything she owned fit in one bag. That's what happened when you spent your life in temporary places, working temporary jobs, always ready to move when the wind shifted. And yesterday, the wind had become a hurricane. Alina closed her eyes, feeling the ghost of Eli's weight in her arms. The way he'd clung to her in the water, terrified but trusting. The mud sucking at her legs. The panic flooding her chest when she realized he wasn't breathing right. She hadn't thought, hadn't hesitated, hadn't calculated risk versus reward. She just acted. Because that's what you do when a child needs you. Rich child, poor child, black child, white child, didn't matter. A life is a life. But Harrison Caldwell had seen something else. She'd watched it happen in real time. The way his face shifted from fear to suspicion. The way his eyes had judged her before his mouth formed the accusations. She'd been here before. Different houses, same story. The help is always guilty until proven otherwise. And sometimes not even then. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Alina looked up, expecting Mrs. Chun with her severance check. Instead, she found Eli's occupational therapist, Kendra, standing in the doorway. The young woman's face was tight with anger. "That man is a fool," Kendra said without preamble. "Everyone on staff knows what you did. What you've been doing for Eli since you got here." Alina managed a small smile. "It's okay." "It's not okay." Kendra stepped inside, closing the door. "Eli's made more progress in 6 months with you than in 2 years with previous caregivers. You see him, really see him, not just his disability." Tears pricked Alina's eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd cried enough last night, alone in this room while thunder shook the walls. "He's a special boy," Alina said softly. "Deserves someone who treats him that way. He deserves you." Kendra's voice cracked. "And you deserve better than this." Comment, "Everyone deserves respect if you value unseen acts of kindness." Because the world is full of people like Alina, doing right when no one's watching, lifting others without asking for credit, giving everything and expecting nothing. After Kendra left, Alina returned to the photograph. Her mother's face blurred behind fresh tears. "I tried, Mama," she whispered. "I tried to be like you, strong and kind and good." But kindness hadn't protected her mother from dying too young, worn down by double shifts and a healthcare system that failed its own. And kindness hadn't protected Alina from yesterday's humiliation. Maybe that was the lesson. Kindness wasn't armor. It was vulnerability dressed as strength. Outside her window, she could see the garden pond in the distance. Scene of her greatest act and her worst defeat. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Heavy, purposeful, male. Alina's spine straightened. Someone was coming. The knock that came wasn't Harrison's. The door swung open before Alina could respond, and a man in a $5,000 suit filled the frame. Tall, silver-haired, with the kind of manufactured tan that came from expensive spas, not honest labor. His cologne entered the room 3 seconds before he did. "Miss Baptiste." He said her name like it tasted wrong in his mouth. I'm Marcus Whitfield, Mr. Caldwell's business partner. Alina stood slowly, instinct telling her this wasn't a friendly visit. Sir. Marcus's eyes swept the small room with obvious disdain, taking in the single bed, the cheap curtains, the cracked tile in the corner. Modest accommodations. But then, you're used to that, aren't you? The insult was casual, practiced. Like he'd been delivering them his whole life. Can I help you with something? Alina kept her voice neutral. Actually, I'm here to help you. Marcus pulled an envelope from his jacket pocket. Mr. Caldwell asked me to handle your departure. Business matters, you understand. He's occupied with his son. Liar. The word flashed in Alina's mind, but she kept her face blank. Harrison hadn't sent him. This man had inserted himself. Marcus dropped the envelope on the bed. That's a very generous severance check. More than generous, considering the circumstances. Sign the release form inside, and you're free to go. No fuss, no legal entanglements. What circumstances? Alina asked quietly. Let's not play games. Marcus's smile was all teeth, no warmth. A child nearly drowned on your watch. Yes, you pulled him out. Admirable. But the question remains, why was he at that pond in the first place? Where were you when he needed supervision? The accusation hit like a slap. Alina's injured arm throbbed. Eli wanted to watch the rain, she said. From the solarium. I was 10 feet away, organizing his afternoon medications. It took 30 seconds for his wheelchair to. 30 seconds. Marcus seized on it. That's a long time when caring for a disabled child, wouldn't you say? Some might call that negligence. Alina's hands curled into fists. I saved his life. You saved him from a situation that occurred under your care. Marcus moved closer, his presence designed to intimidate. Look, I'm not here to debate. I'm here to protect the Caldwell family. Harrison's going through a vulnerable moment, gratitude clouding his judgment. But I see things clearly. And what do you see? Alina's voice dropped low. I see a young woman who got too comfortable in a wealthy home. Started feeling entitled. Maybe even started thinking she deserved more than her station. His eyes glittered. I've seen it before. The help forgets their place. There it was. The real poison beneath the polished exterior. Mr. Caldwell, Alina started. Is a grieving widower raising a disabled son? Marcus interrupted. He's sentimental. Soft. That's why he needs people like me, to make the hard decisions. To protect him from making mistakes. Protecting him? Alina's composure cracked. Or protecting yourself? Marcus's smile vanished. Excuse me. You don't want Harrison grateful to me. You don't want him seeing me as anything but hired help. Alina's voice strengthened. Because if he does, if he looks closer, he might start questioning other things. Other people. Other loyalties. The air in the room went electric. Marcus took a step forward, dropping all pretense of civility. Sign the papers. Take the money. Disappear. That's the smart move for someone in your position. And if I don't, then I'll make sure everyone knows the full story, including the part where a child nearly died because you were distracted. I have lawyers who can spin that tale very effectively. His voice went cold. You'll never work in childcare again. Not in this state. Possibly not anywhere. If you can't stand people like Marcus, subscribe now. Because men like him exist in every corner of wealth and power, undermining the innocent, protecting their territory, turning heroism into liability. Alina stared at the envelope on her bed, at Marcus's threatening smile, at the choice being forced on her. Sign away her truth, or fight a battle she couldn't afford to lose. Outside, footsteps echoed again in the hallway. Real ones this time. Harrison's voice called out, Marcus? What are you doing here? Marcus turned smoothly, his threatening posture melting into casual friendliness. Harrison, just handling some administrative details. Thought I'd save you the trouble. Harrison appeared in the doorway, And Alina saw immediately that he looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, shirt wrinkled, hair uncombed, like he'd been up all night. Administrative details? Harrison's gaze moved from Marcus to Alina, then to the envelope on the bed. His jaw tightened. In the staff quarters? Just expediting. Dad. Eli's voice cut through the tension. The boy appeared behind his father, maneuvering his wheelchair with determination. You found her. Harrison's hand went to his son's shoulder, protective. Eli, you should be resting. I'm fine. I want to tell them about the frog. Eli wheeled closer, his face animated in a way Alina hadn't seen since the accident. That's why I fell in. There was a frog on a lily pad, and I wanted to see it up close. I told my wheelchair to go forward, but I went too far. Marcus's eyebrow raised. You told your wheelchair? It's voice activated, Harrison said quietly. New model. Responds to verbal commands. Eli nodded vigorously. I said forward, but I didn't say stop fast enough. The wheel went over the edge, and I tipped. It wasn't Alina's fault. She was inside, getting my medicine. The boy looked directly at Marcus with a kind of honesty only children possess. She jumped in right away. Didn't even take off her shoes. She saved me, and you shouldn't be mean to her. Marcus's expression flickered just for a second, with something cold before the pleasant mask returned. Of course, Eli. No one's being mean. We're all grateful for Miss Baptiste's quick thinking. But the damage was done. Harrison had seen that flicker too. Marcus, I need to speak with Miss Baptiste alone, Harrison said, his voice leaving no room for argument. Harrison, I really think. Alone. Marcus's smile went brittle. He picked up the envelope from the bed, tucked it back in his jacket. Of course. We'll discuss this later. At the office. He left, but his cologne lingered like a threat. Eli wheeled right up to Alina, reaching for her hand. Are you okay? Does your arm hurt? Alina's throat tightened. I'm fine, sweetheart. Dad said you were leaving. But you can't leave. Who's going to read me the rest of the dragon story? Who's going to help me with my exercises? Harrison cleared his throat. Eli, buddy, why don't you give us a minute? But, please. The boy looked between them, confusion clouding his face, but he obeyed. The wheelchair hummed as he left, and suddenly Alina and Harrison were alone in the tiny room. The silence stretched painful and thick. Comment if you defend truth over ego. Because right now, Harrison Caldwell stood at a crossroads. His son's testimony in one ear, his pride in the other. I need to apologize, Harrison finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. But before Harrison could continue, his phone erupted with calls. Emergency board meeting. Crisis with the Tokyo merger. Marcus needed him immediately. I'll come back, Harrison promised Alina, frustration written across his face. Don't leave. Please. We need to talk. Then he was gone, pulled back into the world of money and power that always demanded more than he could give. Alina sat back down on the bed, exhausted. Over the next 3 hours, the staff quarters became a different kind of hostel. Alina felt it in the way conversations stopped when she walked into the shared kitchen. Saw it in the sideways glances from housekeepers who'd been friendly just yesterday. Mrs. Chun found her at lunch, her expression troubled. There are rumors circulating. About you. What kind of rumors? Alina asked, though she already knew. That you were negligent. That you left Eli unsupervised because you were on your phone. That the only reason you jumped in was to cover your mistake. Mrs. Chen's voice dropped. Mr. Whitfield has been talking to people. Alina's stomach turned. Marcus was poisoning the well, making sure that even if Harrison tried to make things right, the damage would be permanent. In the laundry room, she overheard 2 housekeepers talking. I heard she was texting someone when it happened. My cousin's a lawyer. She says the Caldwells could sue for endangerment. Why would Mr. Caldwell keep someone around who almost let his son drown? The words felt like knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. Kendra found Alina in the garden that afternoon, sitting on a bench far from the pond. "They're saying terrible things about you." "I know. Why aren't you defending yourself?" Alina looked at her bandaged arm. "To who?" "Mr. Caldwell's in meetings. The staff already believes what they want to believe. And men like Marcus Whitfield always win." "That's not true, isn't it?" Alina's voice carried years of experience. "I've worked in 7 houses in the past 5 years. Every time, it's the same. When something goes wrong, they look at people like me first. We're convenient targets." Meanwhile, in Harrison's office downtown, Marcus worked his own kind of magic. "I'm just saying, Harrison, you need to think long-term." Marcus poured them both scotch from the crystal decanter. "The optics of keeping her on after this incident. It opens you up to liability. What if something else happens?" Harrison stared out the window at the city below. "She saved Eli's life. And we're grateful. That's why the severance package is generous." Marcus sipped his drink. "But gratitude and good business sense are different things. The board is already concerned about your decision-making since Vivian died." That landed like a punch. Harrison turned. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing malicious. Just facts. You've been distracted, emotional, making choices based on feeling rather than logic." Marcus's voice was smooth as silk, deadly as poison. "Keeping this woman on staff? It looks like sentiment. Weakness." Harrison's phone buzzed. A text from Mrs. Chun. "Sir, you should know Mr. Whitfield has been speaking to staff about Miss Baptiste. Creating difficult environment." Harrison's grip tightened on his phone. He looked at Marcus, really looked at him, and saw something he'd missed before. The calculation behind the concern. The manipulation disguised as friendship. "Did you talk to my staff?" Harrison asked slowly. "I may have mentioned some concerns for the household's well-being." Harrison didn't defend her. Not right then. His silence was a failure that would haunt him later. Instead, he said, "I need to get back to Eli." As he left, Marcus smiled into his scotch. Harrison returned to the estate at sunset, his mind heavy with the day's revelations. Marcus's words kept circling. Weakness, sentiment, distracted. Maybe he was distracted. Maybe grief had made him soft. But his son was alive, and that had to count for something. He found Eli in the solarium, Kendra helping him with evening stretches. The boy's face lit up when Harrison entered. "Dad, can Alina come back yet? She promised to finish the dragon story." "Soon, buddy." Harrison knelt beside the wheelchair. "I need to take care of some things first." After Kendra left, Harrison sat with his son in comfortable silence, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and purple. These moments had become rare, just father and son. No phones, no meetings, no weight of the world pressing down. "Alina tells me stories about Mom," Eli said suddenly. Harrison's head snapped up. "What?" "Stories you never told me. Like how Mom used to sing to sick kids at the hospital. How she made everybody laugh, even when they were scared." Eli's voice went soft. "Alina knew her, Dad. From before." Harrison's heart stopped. "What do you mean, from before?" "Alina worked at the hospital where Mom died. She told me Mom was kind to her. That Mom treated her like she mattered." The room tilted sideways. Harrison stood abruptly, his mind racing. He left Eli with a promise to return, then practically ran to his study. He pulled out the box he kept locked in his desk drawer, Vivian's things. Photos, letters, her hospital ID badge from when she volunteered during her pregnancy. His hands shook as he sorted through pictures. Vivian at various hospital events. Vivian with the nursing staff. Vivian's baby shower at Mercy General, thrown by the NICU team who would later try to save her life. Then he found it. A photograph he'd forgotten existed, taken 7 years ago. Vivian stood in the hospital cafeteria, laughing, her pregnant belly prominent. Beside her stood a young woman in scrubs, barely 22, with kind eyes and her hair in long braids. Alina. Younger, but unmistakably her. Harrison's legs gave out. He sat hard in his desk chair, staring at the photo until his eyes blurred. Alina had known Vivian, had worked at the hospital, had been there during the pregnancy that ended in tragedy. Why hadn't she said anything when she was hired? Harrison grabbed his phone, dialed Mrs. Chun. "Find Miss Baptiste. Bring her to my study. Now." 10 minutes later, Alina stood in his doorway, her expression guarded. The bandage on her arm looked fresh. Someone had finally convinced her to let the wound be properly dressed. Harrison held up the photograph. "Explain this." Alina's eyes found the image, and something crumbled in her face. "Where did you find that?" "In my wife's things. She never mentioned you." "Never said." His voice cracked. "Why didn't you tell me?" Alina stepped into the study, closing the door behind her. "Because it wasn't relevant. I was hired to care for Eli, not dredge up painful memories." "Wasn't relevant." Harrison's voice rose. "You knew my wife. You were there when she died." "I wasn't there when she died. I was off shift." Alina's voice remained steady, but tears gathered in her eyes. "But I was there 3 days before, when she came in for her final checkup." Harrison sank back in his chair. "Tell me." "Your wife was terrified that day. The doctors had told her there were complications, that the delivery would be high risk." Alina's voice went soft with memory. "I was working triage when she had a panic attack in the waiting room. No one else noticed. Everyone was busy, and she was trying to hold it together." The words landed like physical blows. "I sat with her, helped her breathe, let her cry." Alina's tears spilled over now. "She told me about you, about how you worked so hard to give her everything, about how scared she was that something would go wrong, that you'd be left alone, that the baby would grow up without a mother." Harrison couldn't breathe. "Then she made me promise something." Alina's voice broke. "She made me promise that if anything happened to her, if I ever had the chance, I'd look after her baby. Make sure her child knew love and kindness. Make sure her child knew his mother's heart." The study went silent except for the sound of Harrison's ragged breathing. "I forgot about that promise," Alina continued. "Lost track of it in the chaos of my own life. I moved away from New Orleans, worked different jobs, different cities. Then 6 months ago, I saw the position listing. Caldwell Estate. Special needs child. Age 7. She looked directly at Harrison. "I knew it was her son. Your son. And I remembered the promise." Harrison stared at her, his entire world reorganizing itself around this revelation. "You took this job because of a promise to my dying wife. I took this job because your wife saved my life once, and I owed her." Alina's voice strengthened. "The day I met her, I was at my lowest point. My mother had just died. I was drowning in medical debt, barely eating, working double shifts just to survive. I was thinking about ending it all." Harrison's throat closed. "Your wife saw me. Really saw me. She bought me lunch, sat with me for 2 hours, told me that my life mattered, that the world needed people who cared like I did. She gave me her number, told me to call if I ever needed help." Alina wiped her eyes. "She checked on me for weeks after. Made sure I was eating. Made sure I wasn't alone. She saved me, Mr. Caldwell. Not with money, with humanity." The photograph trembled in Harrison's hands. Alina had already touched his family, had already saved something precious, and he'd repaid her kindness with cruelty. "I should have told you from the start," Alina said quietly. "I'm sorry, but I couldn't figure out how to say it without it seeming manipulative. Like I was using your wife's memory to secure a job." Harrison stood, moved toward her, then stopped. "What do you say to someone who's been guardian angel and victim all at once?" "Don't leave," he whispered. "Please don't leave my son." That night, Harrison sat in Eli's room long after his son fell asleep. He watched the boy's chest rise and fall, thinking about all the moments he'd missed while building an empire. The first steps Eli never took. The first words that came slow and difficult. The countless therapy sessions Harrison skipped for board meetings. The loneliness of a child who needed his father but got nannies and caregivers instead. Vivian would be ashamed of him. The thought cut deeper than any business failure ever had. Harrison had built walls after her death. Thick ones. He told himself he was protecting Eli from more loss, from the vulnerability of attachment. But really, he'd been protecting himself. It was easier to throw money at problems than to face the gaping hole his wife's death had left. And into that hole, Alina Baptiste had stepped. Quietly, without fanfare, fulfilling a deathbed promise to a woman she'd barely known, while he treated her like disposable help. Harrison's phone buzzed. A text from Marcus handled the staff situation. Everyone understands the liability issues. Call me. Liability issues. That's what Marcus called human beings. Assets and liabilities. Useful or disposable. When had Harrison started thinking the same way? He heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Through the cracked door, he saw Alina passing by, probably checking on Eli one last time before bed. She'd stayed, despite everything. Despite the rumors, the humiliation, the injury she'd sustained saving a child whose father had destroyed her. Harrison stepped into the hallway. Alina. Wait. She turned, exhaustion written in every line of her body. I don't know how to fix this, Harrison said. What I did to you. What I assumed. The words I can't take back. You can't fix it, Alina said simply. You can only do better going forward. I want to do better. Harrison's voice went rough. But I don't know how. I've forgotten how to be human. How to see people instead of functions. Alina studied him for a long moment. Your wife once told me something. She said you had the kindest heart of anyone she knew, but that you were terrified of it. Terrified of being hurt, so you hid behind money and power. Harrison's eyes burned. She said you needed someone brave enough to see past the walls. To remind you who you really were. Alina's voice softened. I see that man in there, Mr. Caldwell. Buried deep, but still there. Your son sees him too. From the bedroom, Eli stirred in his sleep. Harrison watched his son's small form through the doorway. He quotes her, Harrison whispered. Doesn't he? Things Vivian used to say. Alina nodded. I tell him stories about his mother. The way she laughed. The way she cared about people. The way she saw beauty in broken things. She paused. He's so much like her. More than you realize. The words broke something inside Harrison's chest. A dam he'd built 7 years ago, holding back grief and guilt and all the emotions he couldn't afford to feel. I've been a terrible father. No. Alina's voice was firm. You've been a scared father. There's a difference. But Eli doesn't need your fear. He needs your presence. Harrison looked at this woman. This stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. This guardian angel his wife had somehow sent from beyond the grave. Stay, he said again. Not as an employee. As family. The way Vivian saw you. The way Eli sees you. Alina's eyes widened. Mr. Caldwell. Harrison. Please. Just Harrison. Before she could respond, Eli's voice called from the bedroom. Dad? Alina? I had a bad dream. They both moved at the same time, entering the room together. Harrison sat on one side of the bed, Alina on the other, and together they comforted a frightened boy until his breathing steadied. And in that moment, Harrison saw what family could look like. Not perfect, not traditional, but real. Hit subscribe if you believe kindness should never be punished. Because what happens next will test whether a billionaire can truly change, or whether old wounds run too deep to heal. The next morning, Harrison called a meeting in his study. Just him, Marcus, and the truth that needed to come out. Marcus arrived with his usual confidence, briefcase in hand, smile perfectly calibrated. Harrison. Good. We need to discuss the merger terms before. We need to discuss Alina. Harrison stood behind his desk, arms crossed. Marcus's smile faltered for half a second. I thought we settled that yesterday. You settled it. By spreading lies to my staff. By threatening a woman who saved my son's life. Harrison's voice was steel. By going behind my back in my own home. I was protecting your interests. No. You were protecting yours. Harrison pulled out his phone, played a voice recording. Mrs. Chen's voice filled the room, recounting Marcus's exact words to the housekeeping staff. She's angling for more than her paycheck. These types always are. Keep your distance before she accuses someone of something. Marcus's face hardened. You're recording your staff now. Mrs. Chen came to me. Wanted me to know what you were doing. Harrison set the phone down. Tell me, Marcus. What did you mean by these types? Don't twist my words into something racial. I meant opportunists. Gold diggers. She's a caregiver. She earns $38,000 a year. Harrison's voice rose. The only gold she's after is making sure my son has a better life. Marcus laughed, sharp, bitter. And there it is. She's got you completely fooled. Fooled. This woman shows up out of nowhere, conveniently connected to your dead wife. Conveniently there when your son needs rescuing from an accident that happened on her watch. Marcus leaned forward. Wake up, Harrison. She's playing you. Harrison's jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Get out. Excuse me. I said get out of my house. Harrison's voice went dangerously quiet. And while you're at it, get out of my company. Consider this your official termination as business partner. Marcus's face went crimson. You're firing me? Over a maid. I'm firing you because I finally see what Vivian tried to tell me years ago. That you're poison. That you only care about people who can profit you. Harrison moved around the desk. She never trusted you. Said you smiled with your mouth, but never your eyes. I defended you. Told her you were just ambitious. I made you millions. And you made yourself more. I've seen the books, Marcus. The creative accounting. The side deals. The clients you stole. Harrison's voice was cold fury now. I let it slide because we went back to college. Because I thought loyalty mattered. But you don't know what loyalty means. Marcus's pleasant mask shattered completely. What emerged was ugly, raw hatred mixed with entitlement. You're making a massive mistake. That woman has you wrapped around her finger, and you're too blind to see it. He grabbed his briefcase. When this blows up in your face, when she takes you for everything, don't come crying to me. I won't. Harrison opened the study door. Security will escort you out. Marcus stopped at the threshold, turning back with venom in his eyes. You want to know what these types means? It means people who use tragedy for personal gain, who manipulate grief, who see rich, lonely widowers and disabled children as meal tickets. It means you, Harrison said quietly. Every word you just said describes you perfectly. Projection's a hell of a thing. Marcus left, his expensive shoes clicking angry rhythms down the marble hallway. Harrison stood alone in his study, shaking with adrenaline. He'd just blown up a 15-year partnership, destroyed a business relationship that accounted for 30% of his revenue, and he felt lighter than he had in years. Comment, I stand for justice if you won't side with manipulators. Because there comes a moment when you have to choose the comfortable lie or the uncomfortable truth. While Harrison dealt with Marcus, Alina did what she always did. She showed up for Eli. The boy's morning routine started at 7. Stretches first, to keep his muscles from atrophying. Then breakfast, cut small, easy to chew, medications crushed into applesauce. Then the reading hour, where Eli's mind could travel to places his body couldn't. Today, they were reading about dragons. Brave ones that protected villages. Misunderstood ones that just wanted friends. Eli loved stories where the underdog won. "Do you think dragons are real?" Eli asked, his head resting against Alina's shoulder as they sat in the solarium. "Maybe they were once. Or maybe they're real in a different way." Alina turned the page carefully. "Maybe dragons are just regular people doing extraordinary things when no one's watching." "Like you in the pond?" Alina's throat tightened. "Like anyone who chooses courage over comfort." Eli thought about that, his young face serious. "Marcus isn't a dragon. He's more like the greedy king in Chapter 3. The one who hoards gold and treats people badly." Kids saw things adults missed. Cut through nonsense with the clarity of innocence. "Your dad's figuring that out," Alina said gently. "Good. Because Dad needs better friends. He's been lonely since Mom died. I can tell, even when he pretends he's not." The observation landed hard. Eli had been watching his father suffer for 7 years, carrying that knowledge with the quiet strength children develop when they have to grow up too fast. "He has you," Alina said. "That's not nothing. And now he has you too." Eli looked up at her with complete trust. "You're not going to leave, right? Even though Marcus was mean." Alina thought about the threat still hanging over her head. The rumors that would follow her to the next job. The way Marcus's words would echo in future background checks. But she looked at Eli's face and couldn't imagine walking away. "I'm not leaving," she promised. They finished the chapter together. The dragon saved the village. The greedy king got what he deserved. Good triumphed over evil, the way it does in stories. Real life was messy, eh? But Alina had learned from her mother that you show up anyway. You do the right thing even when it costs you. You love people even when they can't love you back. Later, during Eli's physical therapy session, Alina caught a glimpse of Harrison standing in the doorway. He'd been watching them. She didn't know for how long. Their eyes met across the room. Something unspoken passed between them. An understanding. A shared commitment to this boy who'd lost too much already. Harrison nodded once, then disappeared. But the gesture meant something. Meant he saw her. Really saw her. Not as hired help. Not as a convenience. As a person who mattered. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. To be seen. To be valued. To know their presence makes a difference. Alina returned her attention to Eli, helping him through the exercises that would never cure him, but might make his life a little easier. Small acts of love. Repeated daily. That's where transformation happened. Harrison spent the next 3 days watching. Really watching. The way he should have been all along. He watched Alina coax Eli through painful stretches with gentle encouragement and silly songs. Watched her celebrate when the boy managed to grip a spoon a little tighter. Watched her read medical journals during her lunch break, educating herself about cerebral palsy treatments that might help. He watched her eat dinner alone in her room because the staff still whispered. Watched her change her bandage with clumsy one-handed motions, never complaining about the injury she'd gotten saving his son. Watched her slip into Eli's room at midnight when the boy had nightmares, soothing him back to sleep with stories about his mother. Stories Harrison should have been telling. Moments Harrison should have been present for. The merger Marcus had been handling fell apart. 3 major clients pulled out, citing concerns about leadership stability. The Tokyo deal collapsed overnight. Harrison's net worth dropped by $40 million in 72 hours. He felt nothing about it. Money was just paper. Numbers on a screen. It couldn't hold your son when he cried. Couldn't keep promises to the dead. Couldn't make you worthy of the people who sacrificed for you. His attorney called with warnings about wrongful termination lawsuits. His board demanded an emergency meeting. His mother phoned from her retirement villa in France, asking if he'd lost his mind. Maybe he had. Or maybe he'd finally found it. Harrison stood in his study on the 3rd evening, staring at the photograph of Vivian and Alina. 2 women connected by kindness across years and tragedy. His wife had seen something in Alina worth saving, worth investing in, worth trusting with her most precious hope. What did that say about Harrison? That he'd almost thrown that gift away. Pride. That's what it came down to. The same pride that made him work 80-hour weeks to prove he was worthy of his wealth. The same pride that kept him distant from Eli because admitting vulnerability felt like weakness. The same pride that saw a black woman holding his white son and assumed the worst. He'd built an empire on that pride. And it had almost cost him everything that mattered. There was a knock at the door. Mrs. Chun entered with unusual formality. "Sir, the board members have arrived for the emergency meeting. They're waiting in the conference room. Tell them I'll be there in a moment." "Sir, they're quite insistent. They want to discuss the Marcus situation. And Miss Baptiste." Harrison's spine stiffened. "What about Miss Baptiste?" Mrs. Chen's expression was carefully neutral. "They believe she's a distraction. That your judgment has been compromised. They're prepared to vote on requiring her removal as a condition of their continued support." The words hit like ice water. His own board, threatening to take away the woman who'd saved his son, who'd kept a promise to his dead wife, who'd shown more integrity in 6 months than most people managed in a lifetime. Harrison looked at the photograph one more time. Vivian smiled back at him, frozen in a moment of joy and hope. What would she do? What would the man she'd fallen in love with before grief and money and pride had corrupted him? What would that man do? The answer was obvious. Harrison straightened his tie, grabbed the photograph, and headed to the conference room. It was time to choose. The company or his conscience. The board or his family. The safe path or the right one. Pride had ruled him long enough. Time to let something else take the wheel. The board members sat around the mahogany table like judges at a trial. 8 of them. All men. All over 60. All wearing expressions that said they'd already made their decision. Marcus sat at the far end, smiling like a snake in a suit. Harrison stopped in the doorway. "What's he doing here?" "I invited him," said Gerard Hutchinson, the board chairman. "Given the circumstances, we felt his perspective was necessary." "His perspective?" "He's been fired. He has no stake in this company anymore. Actually, he still owns 18% of company shares. That gives him a seat at this table." Gerard folded his hands. "Sit down, Harrison. We need to talk about your recent behavior." Harrison remained standing. "My behavior? Or my refusal to victimize an innocent woman?" Marcus leaned back in his chair, enjoying the show. "Innocent is a strong word, Harrison. Let's discuss the facts. A child nearly drowned under her supervision. She has a prior connection to your family she conveniently forgot to mention. And now she's living in your home, influencing your decisions, costing this company millions. She's caring for my son. That's her job." "Is it?" Marcus pulled out a folder, slid papers across the table. "Because our investigators found some interesting information about Miss Baptiste. 3 of her previous employers reported items missing after she left. Small things. Jewelry. Cash. Nothing they could prove, but the pattern is concerning." Harrison's blood went cold. "You're lying." "I'm protecting this company from a liability lawsuit." Marcus's voice was smooth, reasonable. "If something happens to your son under her care, we're all exposed. The board has a fiduciary responsibility. The board works for me." Harrison's fist slammed the table. "I built this company. I own 60% of shares. You work at my discretion." "That's the problem, Harrison." Gerard's voice was tired. "You're not thinking like a CEO. You're thinking like a grieving father. We understand. We sympathize. But business requires cold calculation, not emotional attachment to the help." "Don't call her that. What should we call her?" Marcus stood, moving closer. "The woman who magically appeared after your wife died? Who just happened to have a connection you knew nothing about? Who conveniently was there to rescue your son from an accident that happened on her watch?" "You're twisting everything." I'm stating facts. Facts you're too blind to see because you're lonely, Harrison. Because you miss your wife. Because you want someone to fill that void. Marcus's voice dropped to mock sympathy. This woman knows that. She's exploiting your grief. Your son's disability. Your desperation. Harrison saw it clearly now. Marcus wasn't just greedy. He was cruel. He'd take apart Alina's entire life, destroy her reputation, fabricate evidence if necessary, all to protect his own interests. Here's what's happening, Gerard said. Miss Baptiste will be terminated immediately. We'll pay her generously, sign NDAs, and find your son a new caregiver. One without complicated baggage. And if I refuse, then we vote. 8 against 1. You lose your board. Your investors pull out. Your company collapses. Gerard's eyes were hard. We're trying to save you from yourself. The door opened. Alina stood there, Eli beside her in his wheelchair. They'd heard everything. Don't do this for me, Alina said quietly. It's not worth it. But Eli's face was wet with tears. Dad, please don't let them take her away. Subscribe if you won't let greed and fear dictate your actions. Because Harrison Caldwell stood at the edge of a cliff, and his next words would determine what kind of man he'd become. Marcus smiled. Choose wisely, Harrison. Some battles you can't win. Harrison didn't sleep that night. He didn't feel the $40 million he'd just lost, but he felt the weight of 7 years of misplaced pride. He'd chosen to protect his conscience over his fortune, and now he had to make that choice public. The next morning, he called a mandatory gathering of the entire household staff in the grand ballroom. Cooks, housekeepers, drivers, and gardeners. They stood silent, nervous, whispering about the board meeting debacle and the collapse of the Tokyo deal. They were waiting for Harrison to blame the chaos on Alina, to justify Marcus's lies. Harrison walked onto the small stage, alone, his face etched with exhaustion, but his eyes steady. He held the photograph of Vivian and Alina. Yesterday, he began, his voice echoing slightly in the vast room, I made the most important decision of my life. I chose my family and my integrity over my company's immediate security. He paused, letting the silence build. I know there are rumors. I know Marcus Whitfield has been here, twisting the truth and trying to divide us. He painted Miss Alina Baptiste as negligent, as an opportunist, and even as a thief. Harrison looked directly at Mrs. Chun and the other long-serving staff. I am here to tell you Marcus Whitfield lied. He fabricated evidence to force Miss Baptiste out of this home because he had his own secrets to protect. He held up the photograph. Miss Baptiste worked at Mercy General Hospital 7 years ago. She knew my wife, Vivian. She made a promise to Vivian, on her last day alive, to look after our son if anything happened to her. The room erupted in a stunned murmur. The staff was trading glances, their belief systems shattering. When Eli nearly drowned last week, Alina didn't hesitate. She risked a serious injury to save his life. She acted not as an employee, but as a guardian angel, fulfilling a sacred promise to my family. Harrison's voice cracked slightly. I was blind. I let my grief, my pride, and the poisonous words of Marcus Whitfield turn me against a good, honorable person. He stepped to the edge of the stage. I want to apologize to every person here who heard Marcus's lies and doubted their coworker. But most importantly, I want to apologize publicly to Alina. Alina, who had been standing quietly at the back, walked forward. She didn't seek the spotlight. She simply stood beside him with her characteristic quiet strength. Alina Baptiste is not leaving the Caldwell family, Harrison announced. Instead, I am promoting her, effective immediately. She will be the new director of community outreach for the Vail Foundation. The whispers turned into a shocked chorus. The Vail Foundation was a major philanthropic arm of Caldwell Industries, dealing with millions of dollars a year in medical and educational grants. It was a massive public-facing role, a direct jump from the staff quarters to the boardroom. Alina has spent her life on the unseen front lines of kindness and struggle, Harrison explained. She knows what it means to need help. The Vail Foundation will now prioritize finding and supporting caregivers and families with special needs children. We will lead with the integrity and humanity that she taught me. The public announcement hit the news within the hour. The press, already buzzing about the corporate chaos, went wild. Billionaire fires partner, promotes maid who saved son. The headlines were sensational, but the core message was clear. Harrison Caldwell was choosing a different path. Disbelief was the universal reaction. Financial commentators claimed Harrison had gone soft. Socialites called the move political suicide. But the quiet people, the hospital volunteers, the charity workers, the caregivers, they saw a different kind of strength. They saw justice. Alina looked out at the staff. A few smiles. Many expressions of doubt. The whispers would take time to silence. But Harrison had given her the armor she needed. The truth, and a title no one could ignore. She nodded to Harrison, a silent acknowledgement of his redemption. The fight for her name was won. Now, the real fight for her sister and the key had to begin. While Harrison publicly faced the fallout of his decision, his private investigator, Mr. Reyes, was working quickly behind the scenes. Harrison had given him a single instruction: find the money. Harrison knew Marcus hadn't fought so hard just to defend his fiancée's secrets. He'd also fought to keep his illicit gains hidden. Harrison's hasty stock liquidation had provided the sudden cash flow Reyes needed to cover the forensic accounting costs. Within 48 hours, the audit team delivered damning evidence. Marcus hadn't just been skimming money. He had systematically embezzled funds for years, using offshore accounts and shell companies tied to the collapsed Tokyo merger. He had set up a complex web of deceit to divert assets away from Caldwell Industries, netting him hundreds of millions of dollars. Justice is served. The scale of Marcus's betrayal was breathtaking. He had leveraged his position as Harrison's friend and partner to enrich himself, draining the company's value while pretending to protect it. The merger failure, which had been presented as a simple market fluctuation, was actually Marcus cutting a loss on a fraudulent side deal. Harrison, now working from his home study with the constant knowledge that Alina was nearby, felt a grim satisfaction. He immediately turned all the evidence over to the federal authorities. The news broke like a bomb, overshadowing the earlier controversy. Marcus Whitfield, the ruthless businessman who had just tried to orchestrate a corporate takeover, was arrested for wire fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. Harrison faced the press one final time. He didn't gloat or apologize for his firing decision. He stood firm, maintaining ethical leadership. My former partner betrayed my trust, defrauded my company, and attempted to victimize an innocent woman, Harrison stated calmly. While I paid a heavy price for my past blindness, I will not tolerate corruption. Integrity is the foundation of a Caldwell legacy, and those who prioritize greed over honesty have no place here. Marcus, defiant even in custody, managed to issue a statement. He implied Harrison was a reckless, grieving liar, claiming the charges were a desperate attempt to cover up Harrison's own instability. But more chillingly, he referenced his stolen evidence. Harrison Caldwell is still failing to find things. He should look closer to home before the final request is made public. Harrison knew exactly what he meant: the key and the sealed envelope containing Vivian's final words. Despite Marcus's threats, the immediate danger was gone. The greedy king was locked away, his influence temporarily neutralized. The path was clear for Alina to execute the next phase of the plan. Alina, now Lena Celeste, director of the Vail Foundation Community Outreach, spent her last few hours in the staff quarters meticulously preparing. She didn't use the foundation's title publicly for the application. Instead, she crafted a persona, a humble but highly skilled therapist with a simple, quiet life. She packed 2 duffel bags, the old one containing her history, and a new, anonymous one containing the tools of her mission. She looked at herself in the mirror. The simple scrubs of a caregiver. The quiet, kind eyes of a woman on a secret mission. She was ready to enter the Vance home. Ready to face the twin. Comment if you believe corruption should never hide behind friendship. The sun finally shone over the Caldwell estate, 3 days after Marcus's downfall. The pond, scene of terror and heroism, now lay still and reflective. It was where Eli had nearly drowned, and where Harrison had first seen Alina not as a maid, but as a lifeline. Alina hadn't left yet. Harrison had insisted she take a few days to rest her arm, let her new persona as Lena Celeste solidify, and most importantly, say a proper goodbye to Eli. They were in the garden, Alina kneeling beside Eli's wheelchair. She held a bag of lily bulbs. "See these, buddy?" she asked, showing him the dry, round bulbs. "They don't look like much now, but they're full of memory and strength." Eli, his small face now peaceful, nodded. He was still processing the whirlwind of his dad's public fight, but he understood one thing. Alina was staying in his life, even if he couldn't see her every day. "We're planting these right here," Alina said, gesturing toward the spot where the pond's edge was still muddy from the recent storm. "This is where you showed the most courage, and where I made the biggest mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," Eli whispered, looking at the water. "Maybe not," Alina conceded, digging a small hole with a trowel. "But it was a big, scary thing. And when big, scary things happen, we don't forget them. We plant something beautiful right on top of the scar." She helped Eli drop the first lily bulb into the damp earth. The flower, which represented new life and purity, would grow directly over the spot where the accident occurred. It was a silent, powerful ritual of forgiveness and moving forward. Harrison watched from the solarium window. He saw the genuine, unforced connection, the gentle grace with which Alina interacted with his son. He watched as Eli's face, so often strained with the effort of control, relaxed into pure childhood joy. Alina told Eli the ancient Greek myth of a lily, that it grew from tears of joy, a symbol of hope. "So when these grow every year," Alina promised, "they'll remind you that even from tears and mud, something beautiful and strong can come." When they were done, 5 small bulbs were nestled in the soil. Alina carefully smoothed the earth over them. The physical act of turning the place of defeat into a place of growth was a quiet, profound healing for both of them. "Alina," Eli asked, gripping her hand, "do you think my mom would have liked the lilies?" Alina smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I think your mom would have helped us plant them. She loved finding hope in hard places." It was a final, heartwarming image of resilience, a silent promise kept to Vivian. Alina knew that wherever she went, whatever danger she faced, her heart was rooted right here, in this garden, with this boy. The car was waiting outside, a nondescript rental that Harrison had personally arranged. Alina's new duffel bag sat by the door of the staff quarters. The quiet farewells had been said, the final instructions memorized. She entered her room one last time to make sure nothing was left behind. On the narrow bed, where she'd sat just days ago contemplating humiliation and defeat, lay a heavy, cream-colored envelope, sealed with the embossed crest of Caldwell Industries. It wasn't a paycheck or a formal notice. It was a handwritten letter from Harrison. Alina sat down, the paper crinkling softly in her hand, and began to read. "My dearest Alina, I hope you will forgive me for addressing you so formally one last time before you become Lena. I am writing this because I fear I will never be able to say it out loud without failing to find the right words. I need you to know the truth before you leave this house and enter the shadows. I owe you 2 apologies and 1 promise. First, I apologize for the 7 years of oblivion, for failing to honor Vivian's memory by letting her promise fade from my life. I was too afraid to grieve and too arrogant to see that the help I needed most was right in front of me. I let my pride see a uniform, not a human being. I know that apology is insufficient, but it is true. Second, I apologize for the cruelty of the last week, for watching you suffer Marcus's lies, and for judging you before you could speak. You saved my son, and I repaid you with suspicion. That moment, that failure, is the defining shame of my life. I will spend the rest of my years trying to be the man your mother and my wife believed me to be. You've touched our family twice, and we will never forget you. Vivian's final promise to me was simple. Love Eli and be honest always. She would be proud of the woman who has carried her kindness through the darkest parts of the world. Now my promise. I promise to be the distraction. I will use the remnants of Caldwell Industries to create enough chaos and noise that Marcus and the Van Cess will never look at the quiet therapist, Lena Celeste. I will be the shield that allows you to operate. I have already contacted Mr. Reyes about the safe deposit box. He is doing the groundwork to see if he can access the account without the key. But if you find the key, use it. And if you find the sealed envelope, Vivian's final request, remember what she told you. Use your kindness. It is the only weapon that can break through the walls of people like the Van Cess. Come home safely, Alina. Eli and I will be waiting in the garden, watching the lilies grow. Until then, you are our eyes, our courage, and our family. With profound gratitude and absolute trust. Harrison. Alina lowered the letter, tears blurring her vision. It wasn't the apology that mattered, it was the trust. The powerful billionaire was placing his fate in the hands of a former maid. He had acknowledged her sacrifices and seen her loyalty. The redemption was real. She folded the letter carefully and placed it not in her anonymous duffel, but inside the battered copy of Maya Angelou poems in her old bag, a reminder of where she came from and why she fought. It was time to go. Time to leave the garden of healing and enter the viper's nest. Comment if you've ever had to fight for someone you love. The old hollow quiet of the Caldwell estate was replaced by a strange, new sound, laughter. Not the polite, contained laughter of guests or the strained politeness of Harrison's former life, but the unrestrained joy of a father and son truly connecting. Eli, buoyed by the ritual of planting the lilies and the constant, reassuring presence of his father, was healing faster than anyone expected. The anxiety that had made his body rigid for 7 years began to loosen its grip. Harrison had embraced humility. The man who used to despise media scrutiny now gave interviews focusing only on the Vail Foundation's new mission, praising the courage and compassion of the new director, while entirely omitting her name, to protect the Lena Celeste identity. He used his public platform not to discuss plummeting stocks, but to advocate for better funding for special needs caregivers and families struggling with medical debt. The press, initially cynical, was forced to report on his genuine transformation. The mansion felt different. Harrison let Eli take over the former boardroom, once a cold chamber of corporate dominance. The mahogany table, worth a small fortune, was now a sprawling landscape for his dragon figures and building blocks. Harrison, who once saw the room as the center of his power, now saw it as a place of infinite imagination. He found himself sitting there, helping his son build castles, feeling more fulfilled than he ever had closing a 9-figure deal. One evening, he helped Eli with his physical therapy stretches. They did them together, Harrison mirroring the motions, feeling the stiffness of his own unused muscles. Eli giggled when Harrison grunted in mild pain. Alina said strength isn't just about money, Dad, Eli said, panting slightly. It's about getting back up when you fall. She's right, buddy, Harrison said, his voice thick with gratitude. He realized the greatest wealth he possessed wasn't in offshore accounts, but in the trust he was rebuilding with his son. He found himself thinking about Alina constantly, not with longing, but with deep respect, anxious for her safety as she prepared for the mission. The household staff, initially surprised by his choice to sacrifice his company for a caregiver, now walked lighter. The cook, Mrs. Finch, started leaving Harrison small, comforting meals by the study door, a gesture of support from a staff that now understood his sacrifice. The cold, sterile feeling of the mansion was gone, replaced by the warmth of genuine community. Harrison realized his biggest mistake wasn't his workaholism. It was believing that money could insulate him from pain. Alina and Eli had taught him that the only true insulation was love, vulnerability, and forgiveness. He wrote a note to Mr. Reyes, authorizing unlimited funds for the discreet search for the stolen key and envelope, knowing that the real battle was now outside his walls. He was no longer the ruthless corporate hunter. He was the humble support system. The emotional closure he needed with Vivian's death finally came, not through revenge, but through raising her son with the humanity she exemplified. The mansion, once a lonely monument to his grief, was alive with the sound of laughter and the quiet, steady beat of hope. Late one night, long after Eli was asleep, Harrison sat alone in his study, reviewing old files Mr. Reyes had provided. He wasn't looking for market data. He was looking for any trace of Alina's past that might help him predict and protect her movements. He found a folder from the initial background check Marcus had ordered. It contained routine details, birth certificate, job history, and medical records from her time at Mercy General. Harrison's eyes scanned the dates, realizing something he'd missed before. The time Alina was struggling with debt and loss, the time Vivian saw her and saved her life, was a 2-month period of intense personal crisis. A single, chilling line in the hospital's internal records jumped out. Unidentified NICU nurse, A.B., reported saving 2 infants from an oxygen alarm malfunction during the graveyard shift. 09/XX/2018. Harrison checked the date. It was the same month Alina's mother had died. The same month Vivian had approached her in the cafeteria. The same month Alina was contemplating ending her own life. Alina hadn't just been saved by Vivian. She had also been a quiet, unseen hero herself. While drowning in her own grief and debt, she had saved 2 premature babies. She never mentioned it. It wasn't on her resume. It was simply part of the fabric of her character. Courage over comfort. The thought settled over Harrison with profound weight. He had hired a woman he thought was disposable, and in fact, she was a quiet warrior who had been saving lives long before she came to the Caldwell estate. Her heroism wasn't just for Eli, it was systemic. She was the one who always chose the difficult moral path. This added a new, urgent layer to the threat. If Marcus Whitfield, now in custody, realized the woman who knew his secrets was not just a maid, but someone who lived by a code of silent, uncompromising morality, he would never stop trying to destroy her reputation, even from jail. Harrison put down the file, looking out at the estate's sprawling lights. He had traded his company for his soul, and he had sent his only defender, a tested, quiet hero, into the most dangerous house in the state. He thought about the 2 infants whose lives Alina had saved, unknowingly creating ripples of hope across the city. Her impact had always been much larger than anyone, including Harrison, realized. He picked up the burner phone, sending a single, coded text to the only contact saved there. Safe. A silent reminder of the home and the hope waiting for her return. Subscribe to witness more stories that reveal humanity in unexpected places. If you look away when kindness calls, you become part of the silence that nearly cost a life. Lastly, download your free ebook titled How to Heal from Betrayal Without Becoming Bitter by clicking the link in the description and pinned comment.